When the Australian comedic band Axis of Awesome created a YouTube hit in 2011 with their song 4 Chords, many were amazed to realize just how many songs use the same chord progression.
Recognize this?
Yeah, that's Don't Stop Believing by Journey.
And the cast of Glee? Yeah, there's a few more songs with the same chords. Check it out. My life is brilliant, my love is pure. I saw an angel, of that I'm sure. People kill and people dying, children hurt and you hear them crying. Can you practice what you preach? Won't you turn the other cheek? Forever young, I wanna be forever young.
If you haven't heard the song in its entirety, I encourage you to take a listen. There's a link in the show notes if you want to pause the podcast now and have your mind blown. Go ahead, I'll wait. In this episode, we'll talk about why it's possible to sing a number of different songs using the same 4 chords, why these 4 chords sound so good to our ears, and hopefully when this episode is over, you will continue to listen to podcasts instead of the radio, since you already know what most of the songs sound like. I'm your host, Emily Prokop, and this is the story behind the 4 chords. But first, a quick message. If you like this podcast, you might be interested in other podcasts that focus on the humanities. In fact, if you search Twitter for the hashtag Humanities Podcasts, you'll find plenty of shows on history, language, literature, philosophy, art, and more. These are podcasts by people who enjoy telling stories, exploring the arts in our world, and who want to share their knowledge. Some examples of podcasts you'll find are Go Dig a Hole, an archaeology podcast, the Trojan War podcast, which retells the classic myth, and As We Like It, where 3 friends talk about film adaptations of Shakespeare. Search the hashtag Humanities Podcast today, or follow Humanities Podcasters on Twitter. And if you're a Humanities podcaster, use the hashtag in your tweets so others can find you. So, as much as I would want to, I'll try my best to avoid getting too Julie Andrews in The Sound of Music, explaining how music works for this episode. But there are a few basics to understand. First, let's start with what a chord is. A chord is a group of notes played at the same time to make a particular sound. One person can't sing a chord, for example. They can only sing one note at a time. Do, mi, so. But 3 people can sing those 3 different notes together and make up a chord. Do. So, putting the chords together is what musicians call a chord progression. And the 4 chords referred to in this episode is what is known as major 1st, major 5th, minor 6th, and major 4th. This chord progression, in the simplest terms, sounds nice and natural to us. It's a chord progression that's easy to harmonize with and make up a melody to sing around it. And the melody doesn't have to follow the main note of the chord either, as you've heard. In fact, if you have a great melody, you can always ruin it by talk singing over it, which is a personal pet peeve of mine. If you're an aspiring songwriter, you might be thinking, well, now that I know that, I'm never going to use chords in that order. I'm going to be completely different and use another chord progression that sounds just as good. Before you get ahead of yourself, it's not just this chord progression that's popular. There are plenty of variations. There's a variation known as the sensitive female chord progression, which consists of the minor 6th, major 4th, major 1st, and major 5th. The best example to illustrate the sensitive female chord progression is Joan Osborne's One of Us. The name comes from Mark Hirsch of the Boston Globe, who said he realized this was a common theme he first noticed in 1998 during the popular female singer-songwriter wave, many of whom were known for headlining the Lilith Fair around that time. He recognized the pattern occurring in Building a Mystery by Sarah McLachlan, Hands by Jewel, and Angels Would Fall by Melissa Etheridge. Another variation is known as the bro country chord progression. Admittedly, I'm not a country fan, so I'm not as familiar with this subgenre, which from the look of the internet is not particularly favored by true country lovers. But the chord progression is major 4th, major 1st, major 5th, and minor 6th. and it can be heard in Whiskey in My Water by Tyler Farr, Play It Again by Luke Bryan, and Whatever She's Got by David Nail. As simple as the idea of using a 4-chord structure for a song may sound, early country music may have been based on even fewer chords. Harlan Howard is known for saying all you need to write a country song is 3 chords and the truth. And speaking of 3 chords, you probably heard about the success of a number of bands known for writing 3-chord songs. Most notable among them are the Ramones. But just remember, it's not the chords that make or break a song. It's what can be done around those chords, like harmonies, beats, and additional instrumentation. While Axis of Awesome put together a great video to showcase the popularity of the 4-chord progression, it should be noted that these 4 chords didn't just start with Journey's Don't Stop Believin'. Pachelbel's Canon in D may be the most notable piece of music in the past to utilize it, but again, I'm sure it wasn't the first. So along the same line of these 4 chords sounding quote-unquote good to our ears, a theory about why people get earworms or songs stuck in their head is that a certain note sung or chord played is not what our minds are expecting it to be, and our brains might not be able to let that uneasiness go, and it holds on to it, playing it over and over again in our heads, trying to resolve the song. Another theory for why choruses of songs tend to get stuck in our heads is because it's the easiest to remember, and our brains still want to finish the song, but we might not be familiar with the second or third verses to do that. Scientists have been studying earworms for decades, and there still isn't a conclusive answer as to why we get them, other than our brains love to torment us. Information for this episode was sourced from EasyEarTraining.com, WMBriggs.com, TVTropes.org, the Boston Globe, USA Today, and more links which can be found in the show notes at thestorybehindpodcast.com. If this is your first time listening to The Story Behind, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you'll never miss an episode. Thanks for listening.